Red Bluff sat on the edge of the Wyoming Territory like a scar on the face of the earth. It was a scatter of weather-beaten buildings pressed hard between a wide, unforgiving sagebrush plain and the distant, jagged teeth of snow-capped mountains that loomed to the west. The wind here did not just blow, it hunted. It cut through heavy wool coats and chapped skin, carrying with it a grit that found its way into every crack of a window frame and every throat that dared to breathe it in. Even in the late 80s, when civilization was supposedly clawing its way west, Red Bluff remained a place where the elements tried daily to erase what men had built. The town consisted of a single main street that turned to sucking mud in the spring and iron-hard ruts in the winter. False fronts on the stores tried to look grand, but the paint was peeling, stripped away by the relentless sand that scoured the wood gray. It was a hard place for hard men, and an even harder place for a woman alone. Lily Hart sat in the cramped sewing room behind Miller's general store, her head bent low over a formidable pile of calico and heavy serge. The light in the room was dim, filtering through a single dirty window pane that looked out onto the alley where the refuse from the saloon piled up. It was mid-afternoon, but the sun offered no warmth, only a pale, watery illumination that barely reached her work table. She winced, sucking in a sharp breath as the needle drove into the pad of her thumb. A small bead of blood welled up, bright red against the dull fabric of Mrs. Gable's Sunday dress. Lily quickly pressed her thumb to her apron, terrified of staining the expensive material. She could not afford to pay for damages. She could barely afford to eat. Through the thin wall separating her workspace from the main floor of the store, she could hear the bell above the door jingle. Voices drifted in, distinct and cruel. "I heard she is singing again tonight," a woman's voice said. "It was Mrs. Gable herself." "Well, she has to pay her rent somehow," another voice replied, dripping with a sugary venom. "And we all know Sheriff Dugan does not keep pets for free." Lily squeezed her eyes shut, her hand gripping the needle until her knuckles turned white. She focused on the rhythm of her own breathing, forcing the air in and out, trying to make herself small, trying to make herself disappear. It was a skill she had perfected over 3 years in Red Bluff. Outwardly, she kept her chin up when she walked down the boardwalk, her smile soft and polite. But inside, she was a landscape of bruises and scars, some visible on her skin in the blue-black markings she covered with high collars and long sleeves, and others etched deep into her spirit where no one could see them. She finished the hem, bit the thread, and folded the garment with trembling hands. When she walked out into the main store to deliver the work, the conversation died instantly. Mrs. Gable and her companion turned to inspect a display of tinned peaches, their backs rigid. Lily placed the dress on the counter, took the 2 silver coins Mr. Miller slid toward her without making eye contact and walked out into the biting wind. Nightfall in Red Bluff brought a different kind of cold. The wind died down to a low moan, and the temperature plummeted, freezing the mud in the streets into ankle-twisting traps. The sprawling darkness was punctuated only by the yellow spill of light from the Golden Steer Saloon. Inside, the air was thick enough to chew, heavy with the smell of stale beer, cheap whiskey, and unwashed bodies. Lily stood on the small raised platform in the corner, her hands clasped tightly in front of her waist. She wore a dress of dark blue silk, a gift from the sheriff that she loathed but was forced to wear. It was cut lower in the neckline than she liked, exposing the pale skin of her throat. She began to sing. Her voice was not the brassy, shouting powerhouse of the girls in the big city dance halls. It was soft, aching, a high clear sound that seemed to float over the clink of glassware and the rumble of crude laughter. She sang an old ballad about a lover lost at sea, her eyes fixed on a point on the back wall, high above the heads of the men who stared at her. She used the song to hide the tremble in her body. If she focused on the melody, on the perfect placement of each note, she did not have to think about the eyes that crawled over her. She did not have to think about the flatness that had taken up residence in her own gaze, a numbness she summoned like a shield. The batwing doors swung open with a violent creak, admitting a gust of freezing air and a man who sucked the oxygen right out of the room. Sheriff Mark Dugan stepped inside. He was a big man, broad in the shoulders, wearing a heavy buffalo hide coat open to reveal the polished tin star pinned to his vest. His boots were heavy, thudding against the floorboards with a sound that made the conversation at the nearest tables wither and die. He was a handsome man in a brutal sort of way, with dark hair slicked back and a jaw that looked like it was carved from granite. But his eyes were cold, void of any warmth, scanning the room like a predator looking for a limping calf. He walked straight to the small stage. Lily's voice faltered for a fraction of a second, a tiny hitch that only someone listening very closely would have heard, before she smoothed it over. Dugan stepped up onto the platform. He did not ask permission. He reached out and gripped Lily's arm, his fingers digging into the tender flesh just above her elbow. It looked like a possessive caress to the room, but Lily felt the bruising pressure. "Sing something livelier." "Sweetheart," Dugan said, his voice a low rumble. His smile stretched his lips, but it never reached those dead eyes. "The boys are getting bored with the funeral dirges." "I will." "Mark," Lily whispered, fighting the urge to pull away. "Please, you are hurting me." Dugan's grip tightened for a second longer, a reminder of who held the leash, before he let go and patted her cheek. "That is a good girl." He turned and strode toward his usual table near the iron stove, the men parting like the Red Sea to let him pass. Lily watched him go, a wave of nausea rolling in her stomach, as she transitioned into a faster, brighter folk song. Memories fragmented and sharp as broken glass assaulted her mind. She remembered a homestead on the distant prairie, hundreds of miles east. She remembered the smell of smoke, the roar of a fire that consumed the timber walls of her childhood home. She remembered the wagon ride afterward, alone, her family buried in the blackened earth. And she remembered Dugan. He had been a deputy then, passing through. He had reached a hand down to her from his horse, offering to pull her up, offering to save her when she had nowhere else to go. She had taken that hand. She had thought it was salvation. She had not known that the debt for that rescue would be paid in inches of her soul, day after day, year after year. He had brought her here, set her up, and created a cage made of fear, financial debt, and threats that kept her paralyzed. The song ended. There was a scatter of applause. Lily stepped down from the stage, keeping her head lowered as she moved toward the bar to get a glass of water. She felt the judgment of the town like a physical weight. It wasn't just the women in the store. It was the men here, too. They looked at her with a mixture of desire and contempt. To them, she was Dugan's property. She was the fallen woman who sang for her supper and warmed the sheriff's bed. They did not know she slept alone in the drafty room upstairs. Behind a door she barricaded with a chair every night, praying the lock would hold if he decided to come up. They did not know she was paying off a debt that Dugan insured never got smaller. The doors opened again. This time, the arrival was less aggressive, but no less commanding. Cole Tanner walked in, dusting snow from the shoulders of a canvas coat that had seen better years. He looked like the land itself, rugged, worn, and enduring. He had been in the saddle for 18 days straight, driving a small herd of 50 head up from the southern range. His face was obscured by the shadow of a wide-brimmed hat, and a few days of dark stubble shadowed his jaw. He moved with the stiff-legged gait of a man whose joints were locked from the cold and the ride. He walked to the bar, finding a space away from the crowd, and signaled for a whiskey. Cole preferred the open range to people. Out there, the rules were simple. If you made a mistake, the land killed you. It was honest. Towns were different. Towns were full of lies, hidden agendas, and men who smiled while they cheated you. But the herd was bedded down. His horse was stabled, and he needed a drink to cut the dust that felt permanently etched into his throat. He took the glass the bartender slid toward him and turned, leaning his back against the wood to survey the room. His eyes, a sharp and clear hazel, missed nothing. He saw the card game in the back where a man was palming an ace. He saw the sheriff holding court near the stove, and he saw the woman in the blue dress. She was standing near the end of the bar, sipping water. Cole watched her over the rim of his glass. She was beautiful. Yes, with hair the color of spun wheat pinned up loosely. But that wasn't what caught him. It was the way she stood. She held herself like a wild thing caught in a trap, waiting for the hunter to return. Just then, Dugan stood up from his table and walked over to her. Cole saw the woman flinch. It was a small movement, a tightening of her shoulders, a slight step back. But to Cole, it screamed. Dugan placed a heavy hand on her waist, pulling her into his side. "You look tired." "Lily," Dugan said, loud enough for those nearby to hear. "Why don't you come sit on my lap and rest?" Cole saw the revulsion ripple through her, masked instantly by that practiced, fragile smile. "I have another set to sing." "Mark," she said softly. Dugan laughed, a harsh bark of a sound. He leaned in and whispered something in her ear. Cole watched the color drain from her face until she looked as pale as the snow outside. Something in Cole's chest tightened. It was an uninvited pull, a strange gravity drawing him toward her quiet sadness. He had heard her singing when he was tying up his horse outside. The voice had stopped him cold. It had sounded like lonesome nights on the prairie, like the wind through the canyon. It had caught on certain words, painful words, as if she were bleeding them out rather than singing them. He took a sip of whiskey, telling himself to look away. It was none of his business. Domestic troubles in a border town were a good way to get shot. Dugan left the woman and moved toward the stove, but his path was blocked. A young cowboy from Cole's outfit, a boy named Jimmy who didn't know when to keep his mouth shut, was warming his hands. "Move it, son," Dugan said. Jimmy looked up, startled. "I was just getting the feeling back in my fingers." "Sheriff, I said move!" Dugan shoved the boy, hard. Jimmy stumbled, nearly falling onto the hot iron. Cole set his glass down. The sound was soft, but final. He pushed off the bar and walked over, his spurs chinking in the sudden silence of the room. He stopped between Dugan and the boy. "The lad is just trying to get warm," Cole said. His voice was low, a deep rumble that carried without shouting. "There is plenty of heat for everyone." Dugan turned slowly, sizing Cole up. He saw the worn clothes, the gun belt that hung low and tied to the thigh, the way Cole stood with his weight balanced. He saw a drifter, a nobody. "And who might you be?" Dugan asked, his thumbs hooking into his belt near his badge. "Just a man passing through," Cole replied. Dugan stepped closer. "Invading Cole's space? Well, passing through, man. In Red Bluff. When I say move, people move. This is my town, and that is my stove." Cole didn't blink. He didn't step back. He looked Dugan in the eye with a calm that was more terrifying than any shout. "It is a public house. Sheriff, I reckon the stove belongs to the man who pays for the wood." The tension in the room snapped tight as a bowstring. The card players stopped shuffling. The bartender froze with a rag in his hand. Dugan's face flushed a dark red. He wasn't used to being challenged, certainly not by a trail bum. "You have got a big mouth for a stranger. Maybe you want to spend the night in a cell to think about your manners." "I have slept in worse places," Cole said evenly. "But I would hate to interrupt your evening. It looks like you were busy bullying women and boys." A gasp went through the room. Lily, standing by the bar, pressed her hand to her mouth, her eyes wide with terror. She stared at Cole, shaking her head slightly, a silent plea for him to stop. Dugan's hand twitched toward his gun, but he stopped. He saw the way Cole watched that hand. He realized that this stranger was not afraid, and that hesitation, that doubt, made Dugan furious. He laughed, forcing the tension down, trying to regain control. "You are drunk, cowboy." Dugan sneered. "I don't arrest drunks. I let them sober up and realize their mistake. Get out of my sight." Cole held his gaze for a second longer, then nodded to Jimmy. "Let's go, Jimmy. Air is bad in here anyway." He turned his back on the sheriff, a deliberate insult, and walked toward the door. As he passed Lily, he paused. He looked at her, really looked at her. For a heartbeat. "Ma'am," he said, tipping his hat. Lily could not speak. She felt a flush of heat rise up her neck, a confusing mix of shame that he had seen her humiliation, and gratitude that someone, anyone, had stood tall. She watched him leave, the bat-wing doors swinging shut behind him, cutting off the sight of his broad shoulders. Dugan was furious. He needed to hit something. He turned his eyes to Lily. Half an hour later, Lily slipped out the back door into the alley. She needed fresh air. She needed to escape the suffocating heat of the saloon and the burning weight of Dugan's stare. The cold hit her like a slap. Shocking and clean. She leaned against the rough wood of the building, closing her eyes, letting the tears she had held back all night freeze on her lashes. The door banged open behind her. She spun around. Dugan stood there, framed in the light, swaying slightly. He had been drinking heavily since the confrontation with the cowboy. "You trying to run off?" he slurred, stepping down into the mud. "No, Mark, I just needed air," Lily said, backing away. "You were making eyes at him." Dugan accused, his voice rising. "That saddle tramp. I saw you. You liked him standing up to me, didn't you?" "I didn't do anything," Lily pleaded, her back hitting the wall of the stable next door. "Mark, please, go back inside. You belong to me." "Lily," he growled. "I picked you out of the gutter. I put clothes on your back. You do not look at other men." He lunged for her. Lily tried to duck, to pull away, but he was too fast. He grabbed her wrist and yanked her toward him, hard. The force of it wrenched her shoulder, and she cried out, a sharp sound of pain that echoed in the narrow alley. "You are hurting me," she sobbed, struggling against his grip. "I will teach you respect," Dugan snarled, raising his other hand. "Hey!" The voice came from the shadows at the mouth of the alley. It was sharp, commanding. Dugan turned, distracted. In that split second, Lily wrenched free, but the momentum sent her stumbling backward on the icy mud. She flailed, expecting the hard impact of the frozen ground. Instead, she hit something solid. Strong arms caught her. A hand, warm and large, steadied her at the waist. She looked up, gasping into the face of Cole Tanner. He wasn't looking at her. He was looking at Dugan, and this time, the calm was gone. His eyes were dark, dangerous, and his jaw was set like iron. "Get your hands off her," Cole said. The words were quiet, but they carried the weight of a hammer blow. Dugan stumbled back, blinking. "You again. I should have shot you in the bar." "You can try," Cole said, "but I would not recommend it." Lily was trembling so hard her teeth chattered. She gripped the lapels of Cole's coat, bunching the rough canvas in her fists. She could feel the tension in his body, the coiled energy of a man ready to violence. She knew what Dugan would do. He would kill this man. He would kill him and claim self-defense, and no one in Red Bluff would say a word. "Please," she whispered. Her voice was hoarse, desperate. "Please, don't." Cole looked down at her. Her face was pale, streaked with tears, her eyes wide with a terror that broke his heart. "Don't let him hurt you because of me," she begged. "Just go. Please go." Cole looked back at Dugan. The sheriff was fumbling with the clasp of his holster, his movements clumsy with drink and rage. Cole could drop him before he cleared leather. He knew it, but he also felt the woman shaking against him. If he killed the sheriff, he would be hanged or forced to run, and she would be left here, alone, to face the wrath of the town. He made a choice. He forced his muscles to relax. He kept his hand away from his gun. "Go home, Dugan," Cole said, his voice flat. "You are drunk. You are not fit to wear that badge tonight," Dugan sneered, spitting into the snow. "You think you are a hero. You are a dead man walking, both of you." He glared at Lily, a look of pure, unadulterated malice. "You will regret this. Lily, you will come crawling back." Dugan turned and stumbled back toward the saloon door, slamming it shut behind him. Silence rushed back into the alley. Cole did not let go of Lily immediately. He checked her balance, making sure she was steady. "Are you all right?" he asked gently. Lily stepped back, putting distance between them. The warmth of his body had been shocking, a contrast to the freezing wind and the cold cruelty she was used to. It confused her. She felt a flush of shame that he had to save her, mixed with a terrifying spark of attraction that she had no right to feel. "I am fine," she lied, wrapping her arms around herself. "You shouldn't have done that. He will come after you." "Let him come," Cole said. "You don't understand," Lily said, her voice shaking. "He is the law here. He can do whatever he wants." Cole looked at her, his expression unreadable in the shadows. "A badge does not make a man right, ma'am. It just makes him dangerous." Lily looked up at him. For a moment, she allowed herself to see him, really see him. The kindness in his eyes, the restraint. He had caught her. He hadn't grabbed her like property. He had caught her like something precious that was about to break. "Thank you," she whispered. She turned and ran toward the side door that led to the stairs of her room, fleeing before the feeling in her chest could grow into something that would destroy her. From the windows of the buildings overlooking the alley, curtains twitched, eyes watched. The story was already spreading. The saloon girl and the drifter. She was looking for trouble. She was defying the sheriff. Cole stood alone in the alley for a long moment, listening to the wind howl. He touched the spot on his coat where her hands had gripped him. He could still feel the phantom pressure of her fingers. He turned and walked back toward the livery stable. That night, Lily sat on the edge of her narrow bed. The room was freezing. She had lit a single candle. She unbuttoned her sleeve and looked at the fresh bruise forming on her arm where Dugan had grabbed her. It was shaped like a handprint. She pressed her fingers to the purple mark and cried silently, her shoulders shaking. She told herself she deserved this. She had made choices, bad choices, to survive. She was damaged goods. But then, the memory intruded. She remembered the feeling of the rough canvas of the cowboy's coat against her cheek. She remembered the steady strength of his arm around her waist, not clutching, but supporting. She remembered his eyes. They hadn't looked at her with lust or judgment. They had looked at her with concern. It unsettled the numbness she had built to survive. It made the cracks in her armor widen, and that terrified her more than Dugan's fist. In the bunkhouse behind the livery stable, the air smelled of leather and horses. The other men were asleep, snoring softly in their bunks. Cole lay awake, staring at the dark timber of the ceiling. He was exhausted. His body ached from the weeks in the saddle, but his mind would not shut down. He kept seeing Lily's face, the raw plea in her voice. "Promise me you won't hurt me." She hadn't said it, but it was there in her eyes. He knew he should saddle up and ride out at first light. Men like Dugan were like rabid dogs. Once they fixated on something, they didn't let go. Getting between a small-town tyrant and his victim was a suicide mission. Cole had a past of his own, a trail of bad memories he was trying to outride. He didn't need more trouble. But he turned on his side, punching his pillow, and knew he wasn't leaving. Not yet. He felt a dangerous urge rising in his chest, a need to stand between that woman and the dark. It was a foolish, reckless thought. He closed his eyes, but sleep was a long time coming. Outside, the wind picked up, screaming across the plains, promising that the storm was far from over. The weather turned with the sudden, brutal temperament of a rattlesnake striking from the brush. The iron-gray skies that had threatened Red Bluff for days finally lowered, pressing down on the sagebrush plain until the horizon vanished into a seamless curtain of slate. A bitter cold snap seized the territory, a frost so hard it seemed to stop time itself. The river, usually a churning brown artery of life, began to choke with jagged plates of ice, and the ground, parched and broken from the long dry autumn, was suddenly dusted with a fine, dry snow that swirled like diamond dust in the rising wind. Cole Tanner stood by the corral fence at the edge of town, watching his cattle. The drive was stalled, with the river icing over and the pass into the mountains likely blocked. He could not move the herd north to the railhead, nor could he push them back south without losing half the weight off their bones. He was stuck in Red Bluff. suspended in the amber of a town he was rapidly growing to despise. He pulled his collar up against the wind that sliced through the streets, finding every gap in his shearling coat. The cold was not just in the air, it was in the people. Earlier that morning, Cole had spent time in the livery stable, mending a snapped bridle while the stable hand, a gnarled old man named Silas with tobacco juice permanently staining his white beard, chattered to fill the silence. "It is a shame about the pass closing," Silas had wheezed, pitchforking hay with slow, rhythmic grunts. "But you are better off here than caught on the ridge. That wind up there will strip the flesh off a man." Cole had only grunted in reply, his fingers working the stiff leather. "You ran into the sheriff the other night," Silas continued, pausing to lean on his fork. "He is a mean one. Dugan is especially about his property." Cole looked up, his eyes narrowing. "Property?" "The girl," Silas said with a leer that revealed a row of rotting teeth. "Lily, the singing bird. She is a pretty thing, but damaged. Arrived here 3, maybe 4 years back. Came in on a wagon with nothing but the clothes on her back and soot on her face. Family burned out east of here." Cole felt a tighten in his gut. And nothing. Silas shrugged. "She was starving. Dugan took her in, gave her a room, gave her a job, protected her from the wolves." You might say, of course. A man like Dugan does not offer charity without expecting a return on his investment. Folks say she traded her virtue for a warm bed. Cannot blame her. I suppose a woman has to eat. But she walks around with her nose in the air like she is still a lady. Cole had set the bridle down, the leather creaking in his grip. He looked at the old man, seeing the casual cruelty in his eyes, the way he reduced a human being to a transaction. It was the same story he had heard from the saloon keeper while buying coffee, a collective narrative the town had spun to justify their own inaction. If Lily was a sinner, if she had chosen her cage, then the good people of Red Bluff did not have to feel guilty about leaving her there. She did not look like she had much of a choice, Cole said, his voice low and dangerous. Silas spat into the straw. "We all have choices. Cowboy. She made hers." Cole had walked out then, before he did something he would regret. Now, leaning against the fence, the anger still burned inside him, a slow, hot coal in the center of his chest. He did not judge Lily Hart. He judged the cowardice of a town that watched a woman drown and criticized her swimming stroke. He recognized the look in her eyes he had seen in the alley. It was the look of a trapped animal, forced to survive on terms she had never set, waiting for a mercy that never came, needing supplies for the extended stay. Cole turned his back on the wind and headed for Miller's General Store. The bell above the door jangled cheerfully. A stark contrast to the gloom outside, the air inside was thick with the scent of roasted coffee beans, pickle brine, and dry goods. He moved through the aisles, picking up a sack of flour and a tin of tobacco. As he rounded the corner near the fabric bolts, he stopped. Lily was there. She was standing on tiptoes, reaching for a spool of blue thread on a high shelf. Her shawl had slipped from her shoulders, revealing the slender curve of her neck and the simple, worn wool of her day dress. She looked smaller here, away from the stage lights and the silk, more fragile. As she stretched, her fingers brushed the spool, but instead of grasping it, she knocked it loose. It tumbled down, bouncing off the counter and rolling across the floorboards, coming to a stop at Cole's boots. Lily spun around, a gasp escaping her lips. When she saw him, her eyes went wide, and she took a sharp step back, her hands flying up as if to ward off a blow. Cole did not move toward her. He crouched down slowly, retrieving the wooden spool. He stood up, holding it out in his open palm, keeping his distance respectful. "I believe this belongs to you, ma'am," he said. Lily stared at his hand. It was large, scarred, and calloused from years of rope work, but it held the delicate thread as if it were made of glass. Hesitantly, she reached out. "Thank you," she whispered. Her fingers brushed his as she took the spool. The contact was brief, lighter than a breath, but it sent a jolt of warmth through Cole that had nothing to do with the stove in the corner. He saw Lily jerk her hand back, startled, her eyes meeting his. For a second, the fear in her gaze was replaced by confusion. She was waiting for the leering comment, the unwanted advance, the assumption of familiarity. Cole just smiled, a small crinkling of the corners of his eyes. "The weather's turning bad out there," he said conversationally. "I reckon we are in for a heavy snow." Lily blinked, clutching the thread to her chest. Yes, the sky is very heavy." He nodded, touching the brim of his hat. "You best get home safe then. Do not let the wind catch you." He turned and walked toward the counter to pay for his goods. He did not linger. He did not stare. He treated her as he would any rancher's wife or schoolteacher, with simple, undemanding courtesy. Lily watched him go, her heart hammering against her ribs. He hadn't asked her name. He hadn't mentioned the saloon. He hadn't looked at her like she was something to be bought or used. He had looked at her like she was just a woman who had dropped a spool of thread. The normalcy of it was so foreign it made her chest ache, but eyes were always watching in Red Bluff. Later that afternoon, as the daylight began to fail and the wind rose to a shriek, Lily was hurrying behind the saloon to the woodshed. The door to the back office flew open, and a hand shot out, grabbing her arm and dragging her into the shadows of the overhang. It was Dugan. His face was flushed, his eyes narrow slits of jealousy. "I saw you," he hissed, backing her against the rough clapboards. Lily's breath hitched. "Saw me what, Mark? I was just at the store. I saw you with him. That drifter." Dugan slammed his hand against the wall by her head. "You were spreading your smile around like it is free for the taking." "Did you like his attention? Did you like him playing the gentleman?" "I dropped some thread," Lily stammered, terrified. "He just picked it up. We barely spoke." Dugan reached out and gripped her jaw, his fingers digging into her cheeks, forcing her to look at him. The pressure was painful, bruising. "Do not lie to me." "Lily," he whispered, his face inches from hers. "You are getting ideas. I can see it. You think because he stood up to me once, he's going to whisk you away? He is nothing, a bum. And you belong here, with me." He released her face with a shove. "I did nothing," Lily cried, biting her lip to keep the tears back. "We will see about your loyalty," Dugan said, a cruel idea forming in his eyes. Night fell like a hammer blow. The storm that had been threatening all day finally broke over the mountains and rolled down into the valley. It was a blizzard of biblical proportions. The wind screamed between the buildings, driving snow so thick it turned the air into a suffocating white blindness. Visibility dropped to less than 5 feet. The temperature plunged, freezing breath in the throat before it could be exhaled. In the saloon, the few patrons who had braved the weather were huddled near the stove. Lily was not among them. Upstairs, Dugan had cornered her. He held a sealed envelope in his hand. "You want to prove you are not conspiring with strangers?" he demanded. "You want to earn your keep this week?" "What do you want me to do?" Lily asked, shivering in the drafty hallway. "I need this delivered to the relay station at the South Pass," Dugan said. "Important departmental business. Cannot wait for the morning." Lily stared at him in horror. "Mark, the storm. It is a blizzard out there. I cannot ride to the relay station. It is 3 miles. Then walk," Dugan sneered. "Or crawl. If you do not go, I will arrest your cowboy friend tonight. I will swear he stole cattle. I will have him hanged by morning." Lily looked at the envelope. She knew it was likely nonsense, a test, a punishment for the crime of being treated like a human being by another man. But she also knew Dugan meant what he said. He would kill Cole just to spite her. "I will go," she whispered. She wrapped her thin wool shawl tighter around her shoulders. She had no heavy coat. Dugan had never bought her one, claiming she spent too much time indoors to need it. She tied a scarf over her head and stepped out into the howling white void. The cold was instantaneous and shocking. It felt like walking into a wall of knives. The wind nearly knocked her off her feet. She put her head down and started walking, aiming for the edge of town where the road led south. Within minutes, she was numb, the snow packed into her boots, soaking her stockings, Her skirts became heavy, frozen weights that dragged at her legs. She could not see the buildings anymore, only the swirling, chaotic white. She stumbled, fell, got up, and fell again. The road was gone. She was wandering blindly onto the open prairie, at the edge of town, near the temporary corral. Cole was fighting the wind to check the lashings on the shelter tarp. The cattle were huddled together, lowing miserably. He squinted against the stinging snow, checking the perimeter. Through a momentary break in the drift, he saw something, a dark shape, small and struggling, moving away from the town, heading straight into the teeth of the storm. He wiped his eyes, thinking it was a trick of the light, but the shape moved again, staggering, falling. It was a woman. Cole did not think. He reacted. He vaulted the fence, untied his horse, a sturdy roan named Buster who was huddled in the lee of the stable, and swung into the saddle. He spurred the horse forward, the animal protesting the sudden exposure to the gale. Cole rode hard, leaning low over the horse's neck, his eyes fixed on the spot where he had seen the figure. The snow was deepening rapidly, already halfway up the horse's shins. He found her a quarter-mile out. She had collapsed in a drift, a small mound of dark fabric slowly being buried by the white. Cole bailed off the horse before it fully stopped. He waded through the snow and dropped to his knees. Turning her over, it was Lily. Her face was white as marble, her lips blue. Ice matted her eyelashes. She was barely conscious, her eyes rolling back in her head. "Lily!" he shouted over the roar of the wind. "Lily!" She blinked, her gaze unfocused. She looked at him, but she did not see him. She saw only a looming male figure in the dark. "Promise me," she slurred, her teeth chattering so hard the words were fractured. "Promise me. You won't hurt me." The plea tore through Cole like a bullet. She was freezing to death, and her last coherent thought was fear of violence. "I promise," Cole rasped. He scooped her up in his arms. She was terrifyingly light. He struggled back to the horse. There was no way to make it back to town against this wind. The horse would fight it every step, and Lily would be dead before they reached the first building. But Cole knew the land. He knew there was an old line cabin, a remnant of a failed homestead, in a stand of pines near the creek bed, less than a mile east with the wind at their backs. He mounted, pulling Lily up in front of him. He unbuttoned his heavy shearling coat and wrapped the sides around her, pressing her freezing body against the warmth of his chest. "Hang on, Lily," he growled into her hair. "You just hang on." He turned the horse and let the wind push them. They fought through drifts that reached the horse's knees, slipping on hidden ice, the world reduced to the breathing of the horse and the screaming of the storm. Lily was a dead weight against him, shivering violently, her hands clawing weakly at his shirt. It felt like hours, but it was perhaps 20 minutes before the dark shapes of pine trees loomed out of the white. The cabin was there, a squat log structure half buried in a drift. Cole dismounted, holding Lily tight, and kicked the door. It was frozen shut. He kicked it again, harder, putting his shoulder into the wood. With a crack of ice, it gave way. He carried her inside and kicked the door shut behind them, plunging them into darkness and silence. The wind still howled, but it was muffled now, a distant beast scratching at the walls. The air inside was freezing, stagnant and smelling of old dust, but it was out of the wind. Cole laid Lily on the single dusty cot in the corner. "Do not sleep," he commanded, his voice rough. "Lily, look at me. Do not sleep." He fumbled in the dark, his hands numb, searching for the hearth. He found the stone fireplace. By some miracle, there was a small stack of dry wood left by the last occupant, and a pile of dry moss. Cole's hands were shaking as he struck his flint. Once, twice, a spark caught the moss. He blew on it gently, feeding it small twigs until a flame licked up, casting dancing orange shadows against the log walls. He turned back to Lily. She was curled in a ball, shuddering, her breath coming in ragged gasps. The snow on her dress was melting, soaking the fabric, turning it into an icy shroud against her skin. She needed to get warm, immediately. Cole moved to her, "Lily, you have to get out of those wet clothes. You will freeze." Lily's eyes snapped open. Panic flared in them, cutting through the haze of hypothermia. "No," she whimpered, clutching the sodden wool at her throat. "No, please." Cole froze. He saw the terror. He understood it. She was in a remote cabin with a man she barely knew, a man who was telling her to undress. "I am not going to touch you," Cole said, his voice firm and clear. He stood up and took off his heavy coat. He stripped off his flannel overshirt, leaving himself in his undershirt, and held the flannel out. "Take this. It is dry. I am going to turn around. I will stand by the door. I will not look. I give you my word." He placed the shirt and the heavy coat on the end of the cot. Then, deliberately, he turned his back to her, facing the door where the snow was piling up against the cracks. "Change. Lily, please." For a long moment, there was only the sound of the fire popping and the wind outside. Then, Cole heard the rustle of wet fabric. He heard the catch of her breath. He stared at the wood grain of the door. His hands clenched in fists at his sides, fighting the urge to turn and help her, knowing that to do so would shatter the fragile trust he was trying to build. I am done," her voice came, small and trembling. Cole turned. Lily was sitting on the cot, wrapped in his flannel shirt which swallowed her small frame, the sleeves hanging past her hands. She had pulled his heavy coat over her legs. Her wet dress lay in a heap on the floor. She was still shivering, but the blue tint was fading from her lips. She looked at him, her eyes wide, waiting, expecting him to claim the payment for the rescue. Cole walked over, picked up her wet dress, and hung it near the fire to dry. Then he sat on the floor, his back against the hearthstones, putting 5 feet of distance between them. "Better?" he asked. Lily nodded, pulling the coat tighter. "Why? Why did you come?" "I saw you," Cole said simply. "But Dugan, he said he would kill you. Men say a lot of things," Cole replied, poking the fire. They sat in silence for a long time. The cabin warmed slowly. The intimacy of the space was heavy. They were trapped, the world outside erased by white. It was just the two of them, the firelight and the smell of wood smoke and damp wool. Lily watched him. He wasn't looking at her. He was whittling a piece of kindling with a pocket knife, his focus intent on the wood. He seemed content to just be. "My family died in a fire," Lily said suddenly. The words tumbled out before she could stop them. It was a confession she hadn't made to anyone in Red Bluff. Cole stopped whittling. He didn't look up, letting her speak. "We had a homestead, a spark from the stove. It went up so fast, I was in the root cellar fetching potatoes. When I came out, they were gone." She took a shaky breath. "Dugan found me on the road 2 days later. He gave me a ride. He bought me dinner. He told me I owed him. He has been collecting on that debt for 3 years. Every time I think I have paid it, he adds more. He says a woman alone is nothing but prey. He says he is the only thing standing between me and the wolves." She looked at Cole, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "I do not know how to be safe. Cole, I do not know how to want anyone to touch me without being afraid that it is just another way to own me." Cole set the knife down. He looked at her then, his gaze steady and sorrowful. "I killed a man," he said quietly. Lily went still. It was down in Texas. Cole continued. 2 years back, he was beating a woman in the street. His wife, he said it was his right. I told him to stop. He pulled a knife. I shot him. He looked into the fire. The law said it was self-defense. Technically, but the town, they looked at me like I was the monster. They said I interfered in family business. They said I was a killer looking for a fight. I left before they could decide to hang me for doing the right thing." He met Lily's eyes. "I have been writing ever since, trying to outrun the idea that maybe they were right. Maybe I am just violence waiting to happen." "You saved her," Lily whispered. "Just like you saved me." "I do not know about saved," Cole said heavily. "I just kept her from dying that day." The fire burned low as the night wore on. The cold began to creep back into the corners of the room. Cole stood up and added the last heavy log. "We need to sleep," he said. "The fire won't last forever." He looked at the single cot. It was narrow. Lily looked at it too. She looked at Cole, seeing the fatigue etched into his face. He had ridden into a blizzard for her. He had given her his clothes. He had sat on the floor. "Come here," she said softly. Cole hesitated. "Ma'am, I can sleep by the fire. You will freeze," she said. "There is room." Cole moved slowly. He sat on the edge of the cot. He took off his boots. He lay down on the very edge of the mattress, his back to her, leaving a clear inch of space between them. Lily lay down behind him. She could feel the heat radiating from his body. It was a solid, anchoring warmth. They lay side by side in the dark, the wind howling outside. Cole held himself rigidly still, every muscle locked down. He could hear her breathing. He could smell the scent of her hair, like rain and lavender. The desire to turn, to pull her close, to comfort her and be comforted, was a physical ache in his chest, thick and undeniable. But he did not move. He lay like a stone. He would not cross the line. He would not be another man who took— Lily stared at the back of his head. She reached out a hand, hovering it over his shoulder, but she did not touch him. For the first time in years, she lay next to a man and felt safe. "Good night, Cole," she whispered. "Good night, Lily," he replied, his voice rough. Outside, the snow buried the world, hiding them away. Two broken things finding a fragile shelter in the storm. The morning sun did not rise so much as it bled into the sky, a pale, diluted gold struggling against a ceiling of heavy gray clouds. When Lily finally opened her eyes, the cabin was filled with a strange, luminous brightness that only came from deep snow reflecting light through a window. She lay still for a moment, disoriented by the silence. There was no wind howling, no saloon piano clanking below, no heavy boots in the hallway. There was only the soft crackle of the fire and the rhythmic sound of a knife shaving wood. She sat up, pulling the rough wool blanket to her chin. Cole was crouched by the hearth, feeding small slivers of pine into the embers he had coaxed back to life. He looked tired, the shadow of a beard darkening his jaw, but his movements were efficient and calm. The world outside had vanished. Lily went to the small, grime-streaked window and wiped a circle in the condensation. White. Everything was white. The snow had drifted halfway up the cabin walls, smoothing the jagged edges of the landscape into gentle, rolling dunes. The distant peaks of the mountains were glowing softly, looking like jagged teeth biting into the sky. Red Bluff, with its mud and its whiskey and its sheriff, felt 1,000 miles away. For the first time in 3 years, the knot of dread that lived permanently in Lily's stomach loosened. "Morning," Cole said. He did not turn around, but his voice was warm, lacking the morning roughness of the men she was used to. "Morning," Lily replied, her voice husky with sleep. "We are snowed in for a bit," Cole said, standing up and dusting bark from his hands. "But the storm broke. We will be able to ride out by midday if the sun holds." A pang of disappointment hit Lily so hard it surprised her. She did not want to leave. She wanted to stay in this drafty, abandoned shack where the air smelled of pine and freedom. They spent the morning in a quiet domestic rhythm that felt shockingly intimate. There was no food, but there was an old iron pot by the hearth. Cole went out, digging through the drift to bring back clean snow, packing it into the pot to melt over the fire. When he reached for the handle to pour the hot water into a tin cup he had found, the metal seared his fingers. "Damn it," he hissed, jerking his hand back and dropping the cup with a clatter. Lily jumped, then let out a laugh. It was a rusty, shaky sound, something she hadn't used in a long time. It bubbled up from her chest, genuine and light. Cole looked at her, nursing his burnt fingers, a sheepish grin tugging at the corner of his mouth. "I am glad my pain is amusing to you, ma'am," he drawled. "I am sorry," Lily said, pressing her hand to her mouth, her eyes crinkling. "It is just, I thought cowboys were made of leather and iron." "We are, mostly," Cole said, picking up the cup with the hem of his shirt this time. "But hot iron still burns. Here, drink. It is just hot water, but it will warm you." He handed her the cup. Their fingers brushed again, but this time, Lily did not flinch. She took the cup, holding it in both hands, letting the steam bathe her face. "You are stubborn," Cole noted gently, watching her over the rim of his own cup. "You walked 3 miles into a blizzard in a dress made of silk and hope. That is a special kind of stubborn." "I did not have a choice," Lily said, the smile fading. "You always have a choice." "Lily," Cole said softly, "sometimes the options are just terrible. But you chose to walk rather than let him hurt me. I will not forget that." The air in the cabin shifted, becoming heavy with unspoken things. To break the tension, Cole stood up. "If we are going to get through the morning, we need more wood. And I reckon you should know how to get it, in case I am not around next time." He took her outside. The cold was sharp, biting at their noses. But the wind had died. He showed her how to select the dry deadfall from the edge of the tree line. He handed her the small hatchet he carried on his saddle. "It is not about strength," he explained, positioning a piece of pine on a stump. "It is about the angle. Let the weight of the head do the work." Lily took the hatchet. It felt heavy and foreign in her hand. She swung, missing the wood entirely and hitting the stump with a dull thud. Cole did not laugh. He stepped in close behind her. "May I?" he asked, his voice near her ear. Lily stiffened for a second, then nodded. "Yes." He reached around her, covering her small hands with his large, rough ones. He adjusted her grip, his chest pressing lightly against her back. Lily could feel the heat of him through their layers of clothing. She could feel the steady beat of his heart. It was terrifying, this proximity, but it was also electric. "Like this," he murmured. His breath brushed her cheek, warm and smelling of pine smoke. "Now, swing," guided by his hands. She brought the hatchet down. The wood split with a satisfying crack, falling into 2 neat halves. "I did it," Lily breathed, staring at the wood. "You did," Cole said. He stepped back immediately, giving her space, letting the triumph belong to her. Later, he showed her the rifle. He sat on the cot, cleaning the mechanism, and then handed it to her. "It is heavy," he warned, "and it kicks like a mule if you do not hold it right, but it is the great equalizer. It does not matter how big a man is if you are holding this." Lily held the weapon. The metal was cold, the woodstock smooth from use. She lifted it, sighting down the barrel at a knot in the cabin wall. For a moment, she imagined Dugan's face in the sights. A surge of power rushed through her, heady and frightening. She wasn't just a victim. She could be dangerous. She lowered the rifle, looking at Cole. He was watching her with a serious expression. "Thank you," she said quietly. They sat by the fire as the sun climbed higher, melting the frost on the window panes. The conversation drifted into deeper waters, the kind of talk that only happens when the rest of the world has fallen away. Lily stared into the flames, her knees pulled up to her chest. "Sometimes," she said, her voice barely a whisper, "when the wind blows hard at night, I used to wish the prairie would just open up and swallow me. I would think about walking out into the sagebrush and just lying down until the grass grew over me." Cole poked the fire, sending a shower of sparks up the chimney. "I know that feeling," he said. "It is not that you want to die. It is just that you are tired of fighting to breathe." Lily looked at him. "Do you feel that way?" "I have," Cole admitted. "After Texas, after I killed that man, I felt like I was stained, like I had crossed a line and there was no way back. I do not believe in happy endings for men like me. Lily, violence sticks to you. It gets under your skin like coal dust. You are not a bad man." "Cole," Lily said fiercely, "you are good. You saved me." "I am a man who knows how to hurt people," Cole said. "There is a difference between being good and being useful in a fight. I am useful. I am not sure I am good." He looked at her then, his hazel eyes unguarded. The silence stretched between them, humming with a tension that had been building since the alleyway. Lily felt a pull in her chest, a physical ache to bridge the distance between them. She saw the sadness in his mouth, the loneliness that matched her own. Without thinking, She leaned forward. Cole went still. He did not pull away. Lily's gaze flickered to his lips. She wanted to know what he tasted like. She wanted to know if a man's mouth could be soft. She leaned closer, her eyes drifting shut. But as she got close, a memory of Dugan, the smell of stale whiskey, the rough scrape of stubble, the crushing weight, slammed into her mind. She gasped and jerked back, her eyes flying open, panic flooding her chest. She began to tremble, wrapping her arms around herself. "I cannot," she whispered, her voice cracking. "I do not know how. Without it hurting, I do not know how to do this." She squeezed her eyes shut, waiting for the anger, waiting for the rejection. Instead, she felt a large, warm hand cup her cheek. It was gentle, barely there. Cole did not kiss her. He leaned forward and rested his forehead against hers. He closed his eyes, breathing slowly, matching his rhythm to hers. "You do not have to know," he said, his voice a low rumble that vibrated through her skull. "And you do not have to do anything." He stroked her cheek with his thumb, wiping away a tear that had escaped. "Lily, look at me." She opened her eyes. He was inches away, his gaze intense and kind. "You get to choose," he said. "From now on, you choose. If you want me to stop, I stop. If you want me to leave, I leave." Wanting someone does not mean you have to surrender your soul. It does not mean you have to be safe. You can want and you can say no, and I will still be here. I will not hurt you. Lily let out a sob that was half laugh, half cry. She leaned into his hand, closing her eyes again, soaking in the truth of his words. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay." They stayed like that for a long time, foreheads resting together, an island of peace in a sea of snow. By noon, the sun was bright enough to blind. The snow was beginning to settle, forming a crust. Cole went out to saddle Buster. "It is time," he said when he came back inside. "If we wait any longer, the drifts will freeze hard tonight and we will be stuck for days. And Dugan will likely have a posse out by morning." Lily stood up, smoothing the wrinkles in her ruined silk dress. She wrapped the flannel shirt around her waist and put on Cole's heavy coat. She looked around the cabin one last time. It was just a shack, but it felt like the only home she had known in years. "I do not want to go back," she admitted. "I know," Cole said, "but we cannot stay. We have no food, and the cold will come back tonight." He held out his hand. She took it. The ride back was grueling. The horse struggled through the deep snow, his breath puffing in great white clouds. Because of the cold, there was no choice but to ride double again. Cole sat in the saddle, and Lily sat in front of him, wrapped inside his coat, her back pressed against his chest. It was a torture of the sweetest kind. Every sway of the horse, every slip on the ice, pressed them together. Lily could feel the hard muscles of his thighs, the strength of his arms as he held the reins around her. She found herself leaning back into him, seeking his warmth, seeking the solid reality of him. Cole kept his jaw clenched, his eyes scanning the horizon. Having her this close, smelling her hair, feeling the soft curve of her body against his. It tested every ounce of his restraint. He wanted to wrap his arms around her and never let go. But he kept his hands on the leather reins, kept a respectful distance with his hips, honoring the promise he had made in the cabin. They crested the final ridge and Red Bluff came into view. It looked bleak and ugly against the pristine white of the prairie. Chimney smoke rose in gray columns, staining the sky. As they rode down the main street, the town seemed to hold its breath. People stopped shoveling snow from the boardwalks to stare. Curtains were pulled back. The silence was heavy with judgment. Cole rode straight to the livery stable. He didn't look at the people. He focused on getting Lily out of the cold. But before they could reach the stable doors, the sheriff's office door banged open. Mark Dugan strode out into the snowy street. He was not wearing a coat. His face was purple with rage, his hand resting on the butt of his pistol. "Get down off that horse!" he roared. Cole pulled Buster to a halt. He felt Lily stiffen against him, felt the tremor start in her spine. "Easy," he murmured to her. "I have got you." Dugan marched through the snow, stopping 10 feet away. He looked at Lily, wrapped in the cowboy's coat, sitting in the circle of his arms. The sight seemed to break something in him. "You ungrateful little tramp," Dugan spat. A gasp went through the small crowd that had gathered. "I send you on an errand, and you run off to play house in the woods with this stray dog," Dugan shouted, his voice echoing off the false fronts of the buildings. "Mark, no," Lily said, her voice small. "The storm." "Do not lie to me," Dugan screamed. "You spent the night with him. Everyone can see it. You are easy. Lily, I took you out of the dirt, and you go right back to rolling in it the first chance you get." He looked at Cole, his eyes burning with hate. "And you abducted her. That is a hanging offense, cowboy." Cole slowly swung his leg over the saddle and dropped into the snow. He reached up and lifted Lily down, setting her gently on her feet. He placed himself between her and Dugan. "There was no abduction, Sheriff," Cole said, his voice calm and carrying. "And there was no playing house. I found her 3 miles out on the prairie, freezing to death in a blizzard because you sent her out to walk in a silk dress." He took a step toward Dugan. "She was dying. I took her to the nearest shelter. I kept her alive. That is what any decent man would have done, though I reckon decent men are in short supply around here." Dugan's hand twitched on his gun. "You watch your mouth. You stole my property." "She is not property," Cole snapped, his voice hard as flint. "She is a woman, and she nearly died because of you. I can arrest you right now," Dugan threatened, stepping closer. "Assault, kidnapping, horse theft. I can invent a dozen reasons to throw you in a cell and lose the key, or maybe I will just shoot you for resisting." He looked past Cole to Lily, who was standing in the snow, shivering. "Come here, Lily," Dugan commanded. "Get over here and tell these people he forced you. Tell them he dragged you off. You belong to me, remember? You fall back in line. Or so help me God. I will make you wish you had died in that fire." Lily looked at Dugan. She saw the vein throbbing in his temple. She saw the familiar cruelty in his eyes. Every instinct she had cultivated over the last 3 years screamed at her to obey, to lower her head, to apologize, to survive. But then she felt the phantom weight of the hatchet in her hand. She remembered the warmth of Cole's forehead against hers. "You get to choose." Lily took a step forward. She did not move out from behind Cole, but she moved enough to be seen. "No," she said. The word was quiet, but in the silence of the street, it sounded like a gunshot. Dugan blinked, stunned. "What did you say to me?" "I said no," Lily repeated. Her voice shook, but she lifted her chin. "He did not force me. Mark, he found me when I fell. He gave me his coat. He built a fire." She took a deep breath, the cold air filling her lungs with steel. "He saved my life, which is more than you have ever done." Dugan's face went slack with shock, then twisted into a mask of pure fury. He took a step toward her, his hand raising as if to strike her across the distance. Cole shifted his weight, his hand hovering near his own gun. "Do not," he warned. "Do not even think about it." Dugan stopped. He looked around. He saw the faces of the townsfolk. Most were looking away, unwilling to meet his eye. But some, the blacksmith, the store owner, were watching with uncomfortable expressions. He couldn't shoot a man in broad daylight with half the town watching. Not when the girl was speaking up. Not yet. "You have made a mistake, Lily," Dugan said, his voice dropping to a serpentine hiss. "A big mistake. You think he can protect you? He is just passing through. I am the law." He pointed a finger at Cole. "Get out of my sight. If I see you on the street after sundown, I will kill you." Dugan turned on his heel and stormed back into his office, slamming the door so hard the glass in the window rattled. The tension in the street broke. The townsfolk hurried away, heads down, whispering furiously. The churchwomen gathered their skirts, casting looks of disgust at Lily. She was lost now, officially. She had spent the night with a stranger. Cole turned to Lily. He looked at her with a new respect in his eyes. "You all right?" he asked. Lily was trembling violently. the adrenaline crashing. I think so. Come on, Cole said gently. Let's get you inside. He walked her to the back door of the saloon. He didn't touch her, not with the eyes of the town still on them, but he walked close enough to shield her. Inside, the saloon was empty. Cole walked her to the stairs. Lock your door, he said. Put the chair under the handle. I will, she said. Cole, she whispered, reaching out to touch his sleeve. Thank you. Cole looked at her hand on his arm. I will be at the livery, he said. I am not leaving town. Not yet. That night, Red Bluff was a cauldron of gossip. In the bunkhouse, the ranch hands gave Cole a wide berth. One of them, an older man named Old Bill, spat into the spittoon and looked at Cole. You got guts. Son, Bill said, but you got no sense. Dugan plays dirty. He will frame you for something before the week is out. You best ride on. I am not riding, Cole said, lying on his bunk, staring at the ceiling. Suit yourself, Bill grunted, but do not say I did not warn you. That girl, she is bad luck. Upstairs in a room above the saloon, Lily sat on her bed. She had pushed the heavy oak dresser in front of the door. She pressed her fingers to her lips. She could still feel the ghost of Cole's breath against her skin. She replayed the moment in the cabin 100 times, the way he had stopped, the way he had given her the power. She felt a stirring in her belly, a heat that had nothing to do with fear. It was desire. It was sharp and sweet and terrifying. She realized with a jolt that she wanted him, not just for safety, but for him, for the way his eyes crinkled when he teased her, for the roughness of his hands and the gentleness of his soul. She curled up on the bed, staring at the candle flame. For years, she had been taught that her body was a currency, a thing to be used or hurt. Now, she wondered if there was a world where wanting a man wasn't a sin, a world where it wasn't a danger. She closed her eyes, and for the first time in her life, she didn't pray for the earth to swallow her. She prayed for the storm to hold off long enough for her to find out what that world might look like. The tension in Red Bluff did not break with the passing of the storm. Instead, it thickened, hanging over the town like the heavy, sulphurous clouds that presage a summer tornado. The snow melted into a churned slurry of brown mud that sucked at wagon wheels and boots alike. But the atmosphere remained brittle, ready to snap at the slightest provocation. Sheriff Mark Dugan did not come for Cole Tanner with guns drawn. That would have been too clean, and perhaps too risky given the way the drifter handled himself. Instead, Dugan used the weight of his badge like a bludgeon, swinging it with the petty, bureaucratic cruelty of a man who knows the law is whatever he says it is. Cole found his cattle drive stalled not by ice, but by paper. When he went to the clerk's office to finalize the bill of lading for the rail transport, the documents were missing. I'm sorry. Mr. Tanner, the clerk mumbled, refusing to meet Cole's eyes. He was a small, watery-eyed man who smelled of ink and fear. The sheriff took the file for review. He said there were discrepancies in the brands. There are no discrepancies, Cole said, his voice level but his hands gripping the counter hard enough to turn his knuckles white. I have the original bill of sale from the ranch in Texas. The sheriff has to verify it, the clerk repeated, wiping sweat from his forehead despite the chill in the room. You will have to wait until he is satisfied. Cole walked out onto the boardwalk, his spurs chiming with a sound that seemed too loud in the quiet street. He knew what this was. It was a siege. Dugan was bleeding him dry, forcing him to spend money on feed and lodging while the herd lost weight and value. The town followed the sheriff's lead. It was a slow, suffocating kind of violence. When Cole walked into the general store to buy tobacco, the conversation died instantly. Men he had shared a drink with 2 weeks ago suddenly found the floorboards fascinating. A rancher named Miller, a man Cole respected, caught him behind the livery stable later that afternoon. I am sorry, Cole, Miller said, keeping his voice low and checking over his shoulder. I cannot sell you that hay you asked for. Dugan let it be known that anyone doing business with you might find their own fences cut or their taxes audited. I understand. Miller, Cole said, though the anger in his gut burned hot, I do not want to bring trouble to your door. You are a good man, Miller said, offering a quick, firm handshake before pulling his hand back as if he had touched a hot stove. But you are marked. And that girl, she is marked worse. Cole watched him go. He saw the truth of it everywhere. The prejudice of Red Bluff was a living thing. It wasn't just fear of Dugan. It was a moral judgment that the town wore like armor. Lily felt it even more sharply when she walked to the post office. Women she had sewn dresses for crossed the street to avoid her. They clutched their shawls tighter, averting their gazes as if Lily's shame were a contagion that could travel through the air. She heard the whispers trailing in her wake like smoke, loose, ungrateful, running with stray dogs. She kept her head high, her face a mask of porcelain indifference. But inside, she was bleeding. The fragile sense of worth she had found in the cabin was being chipped away, hour by hour. The breaking point came 3 days after their return. Dugan sent a deputy to fetch Lily, not to the jail, but to his private office at the back of the courthouse. When she entered, he was sitting behind his desk, cleaning his fingernails with a long, wicked-looking knife. The room smelled of stale cigar smoke and lemon oil. "Close the door," he said, not looking up. Lily obeyed. She stood before the desk, her hands clasped in front of her to hide their trembling. "I hear you have been seen near the livery stable," Dugan said softly. "I was walking. Mark, it is a free country." Dugan stood up so fast his chair crashed backward against the wall. He rounded the desk in 2 strides and slammed his fist into the wall beside her head. The impact shook the plaster dust loose, showering it onto her shoulder. Lily flinched, a small cry escaping her throat. But she did not cower. She pressed her back against the wood, her eyes wide. "Do not talk to me about freedom," Dugan hissed, his face inches from hers. "You have no freedom. You have what I give you." He leaned in, his voice dropping to a terrifying, intimate whisper. "I have been looking into your past. Lily, before the fire, there are records in the territorial office, vague records. A girl matching your description accused of theft in Omaha. A girl who spent time in a house of ill repute in Cheyenne. That is a lie." Lily breathed. "You know that is a lie. I was a child. I was on the homestead with my parents. Does it matter?" Dugan smiled, a cold, reptilian curving of his lips. "If I write to the circuit judge and tell him I have a woman here of loose morals who is disturbing the peace and conspiring with a known drifter, who do you think he will believe? The sheriff with 10 years of service? Or the saloon girl?" He reached out and touched a lock of her hair. Lily stood frozen, her skin crawling. "I can have you locked away. Lily, not in a jail cell, in the asylum down in Denver, or the women's prison. They are not kind to pretty things in there. You will be passed around until there is nothing left of you but a shell." Lily felt the blood drain from her face. The threat was precise and terrifying. She knew how the law worked for women like her. It didn't. "Leave the cowboy alone," Dugan commanded. "Stop looking at him. Stop thinking about him. You belong here. With me. If you defy me again, I will destroy him. And then I will bury you in a hole so deep you will never see the sun." He stepped back, gesturing to the door. "Now get out and fix your face. You look guilty." Lily walked out of the office on numb legs. Her old survival instincts, honed over 3 years of fear, screamed at her to submit, to put her head down, to be the ghost Dugan wanted her to be. It was safer. It was the only way to stay alive. But as she walked through the mud of Main Street, another memory rose up to meet the fear. She remembered the smell of pine wood burning in a stone hearth. She remembered a rough flannel shirt wrapped around her shoulders. She remembered laughter over a burnt finger, and a voice telling her, "You get to choose." The memory made her stomach turn at the idea of surrender. The warmth of the cabin had changed her. She had tasted what it was like to be treated as a person, and the thought of going back to being a possession felt like death. She did not go to her room to cry. She went to the saloon, took her place on the stage, and sang. But her eyes were not flat anymore. They were sharp. Over the next 2 nights, Lily became a ghost in the machine of Red Bluff. She sang her songs. She smiled at the patrons. She allowed Dugan to buy her drinks. But she was watching. She listened to the conversations of the cattlemen and the town council members when they thought she was just background noise. She noticed things she had ignored before. She saw the way Dugan accepted thick envelopes from the owner of the mining concern up the valley. She saw him dismiss fines for ranchers who supported his elections. And she noticed the ledger. It was a black, leather-bound book that Dugan kept in the bottom drawer of his desk in the back room of the saloon. He never let anyone else touch it. He locked the drawer with a key he kept on his watch chain. One evening, while bringing him a fresh bottle of whiskey, she saw him writing in it. He was logging payments. Not sheriff's department business, private business. He closed it quickly when she entered, his eyes snapping to hers with suspicion. Just checking the inventory, he had muttered. Lily had smiled. A vacuous, pretty smile. Of course. Mark. But her heart was hammering a war drum against her ribs. That book was the leverage. That book was the answer. On the third night, the pressure in her chest became too much to bear alone. She waited until the saloon closed and the moon was obscured by clouds. She slipped out the back door, wrapped in a dark shawl, and moved through the shadows toward the livery stable. The stable was dark, smelling of sweet hay and warm horses. A single lantern burned low near the tack room. Cole was there, sitting on a crate, cleaning his revolver. He looked up sharply as the door creaked, his hand moving instantly to the gun. When he saw it was her, the tension left his shoulders, replaced by a look of profound, aching relief, followed immediately by fear. "Lily," he whispered, standing up, "you should not be here. If he sees you—" "I do not care," Lily said, her voice trembling but fierce. She walked toward him, ignoring the warning in his posture. Cole stepped back, putting his hands up as if to ward her off. "Lily, listen to me. He is squeezing the town. He is threatening everyone. If he catches you here, he will make good on his threats. You need to stay away from me. For your own good. He told me he would send me to the asylum," Lily said, continuing to advance. "He told me he would make me out to be a whore and a thief." Cole's face twisted in fury. "I will kill him. I swear it." "No," Lily said. "That is what he wants. He wants you to draw on him so he can shoot you down like a dog." She stopped in front of him. She was close enough to smell the gun oil and the soap he used. "I am poison to you, Lily," Cole said, his voice cracking. "I bring nothing but trouble. You were surviving before I came. You should go back to that. It is safer." "Safe?" Lily let out a bitter laugh. "I was dead. Cole, I was walking around, breathing, but I was dead. You woke me up. Do not tell me to go back to sleep." She reached out and grabbed the front of his shirt, bunching the fabric in her fists. "Please," she whispered, the tears finally spilling over. "Please do not leave me alone. Do not make me do this without you." Cole looked down at her. He saw the desperation in her eyes, but he also saw the fire. He saw the woman who had chopped wood and walked through a blizzard. He was torn between the overwhelming urge to protect her by pushing her away, and the selfish, burning need to hold her. He looked at her hands gripping his shirt. He looked at her mouth, the restraint he had held on to since the cabin, the iron control he had maintained for her sake, finally frayed and snapped. He made a low sound in his throat and pulled her to him. "Lily," he groaned. He lowered his head and kissed her. It was not a gentle kiss. It was desperate. It was the collision of two people who had been starving for a lifetime. It was poured out of fear and anger and a longing so deep it felt like pain. Lily made a small sound against his mouth and clung to him, her fingers digging into his shoulders, anchoring herself to the only solid thing in a world that was shifting like sand under her feet. Cole's arms wrapped around her, crushing her to his chest. He lifted her slightly, and she pressed her body against his, needing to feel every inch of him, needing to know he was real. The kiss deepened, slowing down, becoming heavy and heated. Cole's hands moved from her waist to her back, stroking the line of her spine. then up to cup her face. His thumbs traced her cheekbones as his mouth explored hers. He pulled back for a second to breathe, his forehead resting against hers. "Are you sure?" he rasped, his voice rough.
"Lily, if we do this, I am sure,"
she whispered.
"I want this. I want you."
He kissed her again, softer this time, walking her backward until her legs hit a pile of fresh hay covered by a horse blanket. He lowered her down, following her, his weight settling over her. His hand moved to the buttons of her dress. He undid the top one, his fingers brushing the skin of her throat. Lily let out a sigh, her head falling back, but then, as his hand moved lower to the bodice, a sudden, involuntary memory flashed, Dugan's rough hand ripping fabric. She flinched violently, her body going rigid. She gasped, her hands flying up to push at Cole's chest. Cole froze instantly. He did not push, he did not cajole, he stopped. He lifted his weight off her immediately, supporting himself on his elbows. He looked down at her, his eyes adjusting to the dim light. He saw the panic in her gaze, the way her breath was coming in short, terrified, shallow gasps.
"It is okay,"
he whispered.
"We stop right now."
He started to pull away, to give her space.
"No,"
Lily said, her voice shaking. She reached up and caught his arm.
"Do not go, please. It was just a memory."
Cole looked at her, searching her face.
"We do not have to do this. Lily, not now. Not ever. I want to," she said, tears leaking from the corners of her eyes. "I need to know that it belongs to me, that I can choose it."
She took a deep breath, forcing her muscles to unlock. She took his hand and placed it back on her waist.
"Just go slow?" she asked. "As slow as the sunrise?" Cole promised.
He lowered his head and kissed her throat, right over the pulse that was fluttering like a trapped bird. He moved with agonizing slowness. He let her set the pace. Every touch was a question, and every sigh from her was an answer. When his hand brushed her breast, he paused, waiting for her nod. When she arched into him, he moved closer. He treated her body not like territory to be conquered, but like a story he was reading by candlelight, carefully, reverently. For Lily, the fear was there, humming in the background, but it was drowned out by a new sensation. Power. She was guiding this. Her pleasure was the compass. When she finally pulled him down to her, skin to skin, the last of the shame burned away. They made love in the quiet shadows of the stable, the air smelling of sweet grass and leather. It was tender and fierce and clumsy and perfect. It was a reclaiming. With every touch, Cole rewrote the map of her body, erasing the marks Dugan had left and replacing them with something that felt like worship. Afterward, they lay tangled together under his heavy coat and the horse blanket. The lantern flickered low, casting long shadows. Lily pressed her face into Cole's chest, listening to the steady, strong thud of his heart. She felt terrified of what tomorrow would bring, but for the first time, she felt entirely, undeniably alive. "I cannot go back to being who I was," she whispered into the darkness. "I cannot pretend I do not want you." Cole tightened his arm around her, kissing the top of her head. "I am not going anywhere," he said. "I am not running, not from you, and not from him. But we have to be smart," he added, his voice turning serious. "We cannot just fight him in the street. He has the law, and he has the town. He is stealing," Lily said, her voice muffled against his skin. She pulled back to look at him. "I have seen it. He keeps a ledger, a black book in his desk. He writes down payments that do not go to the town." Cole's eyes narrowed. "If we can get that book, if we can prove he is corrupt, the circuit judge would have to listen." "I can get it," Lily said. Cole frowned. "No, it is too dangerous. He trusts me when I'm quiet." Lily insisted. "He thinks he broke me today in his office. If I go back, if I act like the scared little girl he wants me to be, he will let his guard down. I know where the key is." "I do not like it," Cole said. "It makes me sick to think of you near him. It is the only way. Cole, if we run, He will hunt us down. If we stay and fight with guns, we die. We have to kill him with the truth." Cole looked at her. He saw the resolve in her face. She was not asking for permission. She was telling him the plan. "Okay," he said reluctantly, "but you be careful. The moment you have it, you come to me. I will." They dressed in silence, stealing a few more kisses, reluctant to part. Lily slipped back out into the night, feeling armored by his touch. The next day, a darkness fell over Red Bluff that had nothing to do with the weather. It was mid-morning when a shout went up from the alley behind the livery stable. A crowd gathered quickly. Cole, who was feeding the horses, ran out to see what was happening. Lying in the mud, half covered by a discarded tarp, was a body. It was Jimmy, the young stable boy who had looked up to Cole, the boy who had smiled at Lily when no one else would. He was twisted at an unnatural angle, a dark bruise on his temple and a knife wound in his side. Cole pushed through the crowd, dropping to his knees beside the boy. He felt for a pulse, but the skin was cold. "What happened?" someone shouted. Sheriff Dugan pushed through the circle of onlookers. He looked down at the body with a sneer of distaste. "Robbery gone wrong," Dugan announced loudly, addressing the crowd. "Looks like the drift kid got caught trying to steal from someone's saddlebags. Got himself shivved for his trouble." "That is a lie," Cole growled. Standing up, he had nothing. He was a good kid. Dugan stepped up to Cole, his chest puffing out. "You vouching for him? Birds of a feather, I suppose. Just another piece of trash the wind blew in. Get him buried." "I do not want him stinking up the street." Cole's hands clenched into fists. He wanted to strike Dugan down right there. He wanted to smash that arrogant face, but he felt a hand on his arm. He looked down. It was Lily. She had come out of the back of the store. Her face was pale as death, but her eyes were dry. She squeezed his arm, a silent warning. Not now. Cole took a deep breath, forcing the violence down. He looked at Jimmy's small, broken body. He suspected the boy had seen something. Maybe he had seen Dugan taking money. Maybe he had seen something connected to the fire, and for that, he had been erased. Dugan walked away, dusting his hands as if he had just taken out the trash. Lily and Cole stood over the body as the crowd dispersed, muttering about the dangers of transience. "He was just a boy," Lily whispered. Her voice was not shaking. It was hard. Cole looked at her. He saw the grief, but he saw something else, too. The last remnants of fear had evaporated, burned away by the injustice of it. "This ends," Cole said. Lily looked at the sheriff's retreating back. She wiped a single tear from her cheek with a knuckle, her jaw setting into a line of granite. "He thinks we are weak," she said softly. "He thinks we are nothing." She turned to Cole. "I am going to get that book, Cole, and we are going to burn his world to the ground." Cole nodded. "For Jimmy. For us," Lily said. She turned and walked back toward the saloon, her step steady, her head high. She was walking back into the lion's den, but she was no longer a lamb. She was the hunter. The clock on the wall of the saloon ticked with the slow, heavy rhythm of a judge's gavel. It was 3 a.m. The main floor was silent, smelling of stale beer and damp sawdust. Upstairs, the boarding rooms were quiet, filled with the exhausted sleep of miners and drifters. Lily Hart stood in the hallway outside Sheriff Mark Dugan's private office. Her heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird, threatening to bruise the skin from the inside. She held a small brass key in her sweating palm, an impression she had taken in wax days ago, filed down by the local locksmith who thought she had lost the key to her jewelry box. She looked left, then right. The shadows were deep. She slid the key into the lock. It turned with a soft, lubricated click. Lily slipped inside and closed the door, leaning against it for a moment to breathe. The room was cold. Moonlight filtered through the slats of the blinds, cutting the darkness into stripes of silver and black. She moved to the desk, her footsteps silent on the rug. She lit the kerosene lamp on the desk, turning the wick down until it was barely aglow, a single eye in the dark. She opened the bottom drawer. It was locked, but the wood was old and warped. She used a letter opener from the desktop to shimmy the latch. With a groan of protesting timber, it gave way. The black ledger was there. Lily pulled it out, her hands shaking so badly she nearly dropped it. She opened it to the recent pages. The handwriting was Dugan's, sharp, angular, aggressive. October 12th, mining company, protection fee, $50. November 4th, Miller fines, dismissed, $20 cash. November 15th, silence regarding the incident at the creek, $100. Lily felt bile rise in her throat. It was all there, extortion, bribery. He was bleeding the town dry while pretending to be its savior. She flipped back, turning the pages to 3 years ago, to the month she had arrived, to the month her life had burned down. Her finger traced the dates. August 14th, Hart Homestead fire. The entry was not a report of a tragedy. It was a financial note. August 16th, transfer of deed. Hart lands to M. Dugan. 0 cost. Facilitated by fire sale clause. August 17th, sale of Hart timber rights to railway, $400. Lily stopped breathing. The room seemed to tilt on its axis. He hadn't just found her. He hadn't just saved her. He had profited from the fire. He had taken her father's land, the land her family had died for, and sold the timber to the railroad 2 days after they were buried. A sound from the hallway froze the blood in her veins. Heavy boots, the jingle of spurs. Dugan was back. He wasn't supposed to return until dawn from his rounds at the county seat. Lily scrambled. She grabbed the loose paper folded into the back of the ledger, the original transfer deed with her father's forged signature, and shoved it into her bodice. She shoved the ledger back into the drawer and kicked it shut. The doorknob turned. Lily blew out the lamp. She dove for the window, throwing the sash up just as the door crashed open. "Who is there?" Dugan roared, his silhouette filling the frame. Lily didn't answer. She scrambled out onto the icy roof of the porch, her skirts tangling around her legs. She slid, catching herself on the gutter, and dropped into the alleyway below. The mud cushioned her fall, but the impact jarred her teeth. She scrambled up and ran. Above her, in the window, Dugan struck a match. The flare illuminated his face. Twisted in a snarl, he saw her running figure, the flash of her pale shawl, the unmistakable color of her hair. "Lily!" he shouted, a sound of pure, impotent rage. He looked at the desk. He saw the scratched lock on the drawer. He opened it and checked the ledger. The deed was gone. His face went from hot fury to a deadly, glacial calm. She knew, and she had proof. He could not let her talk, and he could not let the town believe her. He needed a distraction, a chaos so great that a missing piece of paper and the accusations of a fallen woman would be ashes in the wind. He walked out of the office and down the back stairs to the kitchen. He found the store of coal oil used for the lamps. He took a heavy can and splashed it across the floorboards near the base of the stairs, the only exit for the boarders sleeping above. He lit a match. "I warned you, Lily," he whispered. He dropped the match. The fire did not start as a flicker. It whooshed into life with a roar, a hungry beast devouring the oxygen. Lily was halfway to the livery stable to find coal when the bell began to ring. It was the frantic, uneven clangor of the fire bell. She turned. A column of black smoke was punching a hole in the night sky above the saloon. Orange flames were already licking out of the lower windows. "No!" she gasped. She ran back. The street was filling with people. Men in long underwear pulling on boots, women clutching children. The bucket brigade was forming, but it was too slow. The wood of the saloon, dried out by years of high-altitude wind, was burning like paper. Lily saw faces in the windows of the second floor. Trapped. She did not think. She ran toward the building. "Lily!" It was Cole. He grabbed her arm as she tried to rush the front door. "You cannot go in there. It is a furnace!" he shouted over the roar of the blaze. "There are people upstairs," Lily screamed, wrenching free. "Sarah is in room 4. She ducked under a falling beam and vanished into the smoke. Cole cursed. pulled his bandana up over his nose, and went after her. Inside, the heat was physical, a wall that pushed back against them. The stairs were gone, consumed by the fire Dugan had set at their base, but the back service ladder was still holding. Lily was climbing, coughing, her eyes streaming. She reached the hallway. "Fire! Get out!" she screamed, banging on doors. Men stumbled out, hacking, confused, diving for the windows to jump to the snow below. Lily reached room 4. The door was jammed. She kicked it, threw her shoulder against it. "Sarah! Inside!" a woman screamed. The floorboards beneath Lily's feet groaned. Cole appeared out of the smoke, his eyes wild. He slammed his shoulder into the door. It splintered open. The room was full of fire. The curtains had caught. Sarah, a frail woman who worked in the kitchens, was huddled in the corner, surrounded by flames. Cole lunged for her, but the ceiling beam above her gave way with a crack like a cannon shot. It crashed down, bringing the roof with it. "Cole!" Lily screamed. Lunging forward, he grabbed Lily around the waist, hauling her back just as the floor in front of them collapsed into the inferno below. "We cannot get her!" Cole yelled, his voice raw. "She is gone! Lily, we have to go!" "No!" Lily fought him, reaching out toward the wall of fire where Sarah had been. Cole didn't argue. He lifted Lily off her feet, wrapping his heavy coat around her head to shield her from the falling sparks, and ran for the window. He kicked the glass out and jumped. They landed in a snowdrift that had been piled against the side of the building by the plow. The impact knocked the wind out of them. Cole rolled, covering Lily with his body as the saloon roof collapsed inward, sending a geyser of sparks 100 feet into the air. Lily lay in the snow, coughing up soot. She watched the building burn. She thought of the deed in her bodice. She thought of Dugan's face in the window. "He did this," she choked out, clutching Cole's shirt. "He did this because of me." The next morning, the town of Red Bluff smelled of wet ash and tragedy. The saloon was a smoking crater. 3 bodies had been pulled from the ruins. Sarah was one of them. Dugan stood on the boardwalk of the Mercantile, addressing the crowd. He looked exhausted, soot smeared artfully on his cheek. It was arson, Dugan declared, his voice grave. "We found the kerosene can, and witnesses saw a man running from the back alley just before the blaze, a man who has been causing trouble since the day he rode in." He pointed a finger at Cole, who was standing near the ruins with Lily, trying to wrap a bandage around her burned hand. "That man? Cole Tanner?" The crowd turned. Their eyes were hard, red-rimmed from lack of sleep and filled with grief. They needed someone to blame. They needed a villain. And the drifter with the gun was a perfect fit. "Arrest him," someone shouted. Cole stood up, moving Lily behind him. "I did not set that fire. Dugan, and you know it. You did it out of spite." Dugan lied smoothly. "Because I impounded your cattle. You wanted to burn the town down. Deputies moved in, guns drawn. There were 4 of them. Do not fight." "Cole," Lily whispered, gripping his coat. "They will kill you right here." Cole looked at the deputies, then at Dugan. He saw the trap. If he drew his gun, he was dead. If he surrendered, he was a prisoner. He raised his hand slowly. They swarmed him. A rifle butt cracked against his skull, sending him to his knees. They kicked him, once, twice in the ribs, before hauling him up and dragging him toward the jail. Lily tried to follow, but Dugan stepped in her path. "Go home, Lily," he said coldly, "before people start asking why you were running out of the alley too." Cole sat in the cell. His head throbbed, and every breath was a knife in his side where a rib had cracked. The jail was cold. Dugan came in an hour later. He dismissed the deputy and stood by the bars. "You have the deed," Dugan said quietly. "I do not know what you are talking about," Cole rasped, wiping blood from his lip. "You do not have it. She does." Dugan stepped closer. "You are going to hang Tanner for arson and murder, unless what? Unless she brings me that paper, and unless she stands up in court tomorrow and testifies that she saw you with the kerosene can." Cole laughed, a wet, gurgling sound. "She will never do that." "We will see," Dugan said. Everyone breaks. Cowboy. Even her. Late that afternoon, Dugan found Lily. She was sitting in the back of the general store, staring at nothing. He sat down beside her. He didn't touch her. He didn't have to. He hangs tomorrow, Dugan said, a summary judgment. The town is demanding blood. Lily did not look at him. I know you set the fire. Mark, I know you stole my father's land. And who will believe you? Dugan asked. You are the woman who slept with the arsonist. You are an accomplice. He leaned in. But I am a merciful man. You bring me that paper you stole. You testify that he was crazy, that he started the fire, and I will let him go. I will banish him from the territory. But he will live. And me? Lily asked. You will come back to me. Dugan said. And we will forget this ever happened. Lily looked at him then. She saw the monster beneath the skin. She saw the man who had burned her family's legacy, and then burned 3 innocent people just to cover a theft. If I refuse, then he hangs at noon. And I will make sure everyone knows you held the match. Lily stood up. She walked out of the store. She walked to the church. It was empty. She sat in the front pew and looked at the cross. She thought about safety. She thought about the 3 years she had spent bowing her head, swallowing her voice, trying to survive by being small. It hadn't worked. Safety bought with silence was just a slow death. She stood up. She reached into her dress and touched the folded paper. She walked to the makeshift gathering hall at the hotel, where the town council and the angry mob were drinking coffee and planning the hanging. She pushed the doors open. The room went silent. I have something to say, Lily announced. Her voice shook, but her feet were planted wide. Go away, Lily, the mayor said. We have enough trouble. No, Lily said. She walked to the center of the room. She pulled the paper from her dress. Cole Tanner did not set the fire. Sheriff Dugan did. A roar of disbelief went up. Dugan, standing in the corner, went pale. He is a liar, Dugan shouted. She is trying to save her lover. Look at this, Lily screamed, slamming the paper down on the table. Look at the date. My family died on the 14th. This deed says Mark Dugan took our land on the 16th. He sold the timber rights for $400 the next day. She looked around the room, meeting the eyes of the people who had shunned her. He has been stealing from all of you. He keeps a ledger in his desk. He takes your fines. He takes protection money. And when I found proof, he burned down the saloon to hide it. He killed Sarah. He killed Jimmy, to hide his own crimes. The room wavered. The mayor picked up the deed. He adjusted his spectacles. This is Dugan's signature, the mayor muttered. And the date is correct. It is a forgery, Dugan yelled, his hand moving to his gun. Dr. Evans, a gray-haired man who had treated Lily's bruises more than once without asking questions, stood up. I saw the bruises on her. Mark, the doctor said quietly. For years, I never said anything, but a man who beats a woman is a man capable of anything. I saw the ledger. Mr. Higgins, the saloon owner, said slowly, I saw him writing in a black book. He told me it was inventory, but he never let me see it. Doubt was spreading like a contagion. But Dugan had his deputies. Arrest her, Dugan shrieked. She is hysterical. The deputies moved forward, but the doctor and Mr. Higgins stepped in front of Lily. We will not arrest anyone until we see this ledger. The mayor decided. It burned in the fire, Dugan claimed. Then we have a problem. The mayor said, that night, the blizzard returned. The wind howled like a banshee, tearing at the eaves of the buildings. Inside the jail, Cole lay on the cot, listening to the wind. He figured he had until morning. The back door of the jail creaked. Cole sat up. The deputy on guard slumped to the floor, unconscious. Behind him stood Mr. Higgins, holding a heavy iron skillet. Dr. Evans stepped in, carrying a ring of keys. Quiet, son, the doctor whispered. We are getting you out. They unlocked the cell. Cole groaned as he stood, his ribs screaming. Where is Lily? Cole asked. Waiting, Higgins said. Outside. They let him out the back. Lily was there, holding the reins of 2 horses. Buster, and a mare stolen from the corral. She was wearing men's trousers and a heavy coat she had scavenged.
You did it, Cole breathed, looking at her. You stood up to him.
We have to go, Lily said, her eyes dark and urgent. Half the town believes me, but Dugan still has the guns. He will come for us as soon as he realizes you are gone. Cole mounted Buster with a groan of pain. He looked at the doctor and Higgins. Thank you. Ride for the high country, Higgins warned. He won't follow you into the pass in this weather. They rode. They fled into the teeth of the storm, leaving Red Bluff behind. They crossed the frozen creek, the ice cracking ominously under the horses' hooves. They climbed into the rugged foothills, where the pines groaned under the weight of the snow and the cliffs loomed dark against the sky. It was a grueling, brutal journey. They had little food, some jerky and hardtack Lily had stolen. They had one blanket. They found shelter on the second night in a shallow cave protected by a rock overhang. It was bitterly cold. Cole was feverish. His ribs were badly bruised, possibly broken, and the cuts on his face were angry and red. Lily tended to him. She melted snow to wash the dried blood from his skin. Her fingers were gentle, reverent, tracing the scars on his chest and the fresh welts from the deputy's boots. I am sorry, Cole whispered, his teeth chattering. I dragged you into this hell. Lily shook her head. She lay down beside him, pulling the single blanket over them both. She wrapped her arms around him, pressing her body against his to share her heat. You did not drag me, she said fiercely. I walked. I chose this. I would rather freeze out here with you than be warm in that town under his thumb. She kissed his forehead. You are safe now. Cole, sleep in the unforgiving landscape. Their bond hardened like steel tempered in ice. They relied on each other for everything. Cole forced himself to hunt for rabbits despite his pain, refusing to let her go hungry. Lily kept watch while he slept, the rifle across her lap, fighting off the exhaustion. The nights were the hardest, yet the most beautiful. The cold forced a physical intimacy that stripped away all pretense. They clung to each other under the blanket, limbs tangled. One night, the fever broke. Cole woke to find Lily watching him in the moonlight reflecting off the snow. Is this what you want? Cole asked softly, brushing a strand of hair from her face. This hard life? Being hunted? Lily leaned in and kissed him. It was a slow, claiming kiss. I want you, she whispered against his lips. I want us. Everything else is just weather. Her fear was receding. Every time he asked, every time he waited for her answer, the old wounds healed a little more. She realized that safety wasn't a place. It was a person. 4 days later, ragged, starving, and frostbitten, they rode into a wide, hidden valley high in the mountains. Smoke curled from the chimney of a sturdy ranch house. It was Ethan's place. Ethan, a bear of a man with a beard like a thicket, came out onto the porch with a shotgun. When he recognized Cole, he lowered the weapon and ran through the snow. Cole, you look like death warmed over. We need help. Ethan, Cole rasped, sliding from the saddle and nearly collapsing. Ethan caught him. He looked at Lily, who was sitting tall in the saddle despite her exhaustion, the rifle slung across her back. Who is she? Ethan asked. She is the reason I am alive, Cole said. Ethan nodded. Come inside. The coffee is hot. They had found sanctuary, but as Lily looked back at the trail they had carved through the snow, she knew it wasn't over. Dugan was still out there, and she still had the deed. They would rest, they would heal, and then they would finish it. The thaw came to the high valley not as a gentle awakening, but as a violent cracking of the earth. The creek, which had been a ribbon of silence for months, roared back to life, brown and angry with snowmelt, tearing at the banks where the willows grew. The air lost its bite, replaced by the scent of wet pine needles and the deep, rich smell of mud turning to life. For Lily Hart, the ranch offered a life that was as foreign to her as the surface of the moon. Ethan's place was a sprawling operation tucked into a fold of the mountains where the wind could not quite reach. It was a world of hard labor, early risings, and calloused hands, and she loved it. In Red Bluff, her hands had been soft, stained only by needle pricks and the phantom grease of the saloon tables. Here, they were stained with earth and liniment. Ethan, a bear of a man with a beard like a thicket of brambles, did not treat her like a porcelain doll or a fallen woman. He treated her like a hand who needed to earn her keep. She learned to ride, not side saddle like a lady of quality, but astride a sturdy mare named Bess, gripping with her knees as they navigated the rocky slopes to check for strays. She learned to hold a calf down for branding, the smell of singed hair making her nose wrinkle, but her grip never slipping. She learned that the land did not care about her past. The land only cared if she could work, but the world of men was less forgiving than the soil. It was late in the afternoon on a Tuesday when the trouble started near the corral. Two of the hired hands, men who had drifted in for the spring roundup, were leaning against the fence, watching Lily carry 2 heavy buckets of water toward the garden plot she was trying to coax from the hard ground. "I do not know why Ethan keeps her around," one man muttered, loud enough for his voice to carry. "A woman like that belongs in a house with red curtains, not a ranch." The other man laughed, a low, ugly sound. "Maybe he likes the company, or maybe the drifter is sharing the goods." Lily stopped. The old Lily, the one who lived in the shadow of Sheriff Dugan, would have kept her head down. She would have pretended not to hear. She would have hurried away, swallowing the shame like a bitter pill, but that woman had died in the snow. Lily set the buckets down. The water sloshed over the rims, darkening the dust. She turned slowly and walked toward the men. She wiped her hands on her apron. Her chin lifted high. "If you have something to say to me, Mr. Juergens, you can say it to my face. She said—" Her voice was steady, cutting through the crisp air. The men stopped laughing. Juergens, a man with a face like tanned leather, squinted at her. "I just said it is strange is all," Juergens said, shifting uncomfortably. "A saloon girl playing rancher." "I am not playing," Lily said. "I work just as hard as you. And as for where I belong where I choose to stand. If you spend less time worrying about my past and more time fixing that section of fence you promised Ethan you would mend, maybe we would not be losing calves." She held his gaze until he looked away, muttering under his breath and picking up his tools. Lily picked up her buckets and walked on. She felt a trembling in her knees, but it was not fear. It was the adrenaline of dignity. Cole was watching from the door of the barn. He had seen the exchange. He walked over to take the buckets from her, his limp still pronounced from the beating in the jail. "You did not have to do that," he said quietly. "I would have handled them." "I know," Lily said, brushing a strand of hair from her eyes, "but I needed to handle them. I am done letting men speak for me." Cole looked at her, and the guilt that lived in his chest tightened. He saw the strength in her. Yes, but he also saw the danger she was in because of him. Rumors were already drifting up from the valley floor. Dugan was not done. "You could have had a quiet life." "Lily," Cole said, his voice rough, "if I had just kept riding that night in the saloon, you would be safe." Lily looked at the vast, open sky, framed by the jagged peaks of the mountains. "I would be a pet. Cole, a well-fed prisoner. Safety without choice is just another kind of prison. I would rather be here, with the mud and the whispers and the danger, than back in that velvet cage." Their makeshift family grew by one a week later. Cole found him hiding in the hayloft. He was a boy of perhaps 12 years, with skin the color of polished copper and eyes that held the wary, hunted look of a coyote pup. He was mixed heritage, likely Arapaho and white, a combination that made him welcome nowhere in the territory. He had been drifting between camps, chased off by settlers who saw him as a savage and native families who saw him as a reminder of encroachment. Cole brought him down, holding him by the scruff of his neck, not roughly, but firmly. "Found a stowaway," Cole announced, bringing the boy into the kitchen where Lily was kneading dough. The boy flinched when he saw Lily. Expecting a blow or a scream, Lily stopped. She wiped the flour from her hands and knelt down. She saw herself in the boy's eyes. She saw the belief that the world was a boot and he was the bug. "Are you hungry?" Lily asked softly. The boy nodded, mute,
Sit down, Lily said. We have stew. They named him Sam. He did not speak for 3 days.
But he ate like a wolf, and he watched Lily with a desperate, silent intensity. Lily made a quiet promise to herself as she watched him devour his 3rd bowl of stew. She would give him the care she never had. She would be the person who did not look away. Cole took to the boy immediately. He saw a chance to do something right, to shape a life instead of taking one. He treated Sam like a younger brother. You do not hold the reins like you are choking a chicken. Sam, Cole said one afternoon in the corral, guiding the boy's hands. You hold them like you are shaking hands with a friend, firm but polite. He taught the boy to shoot, not for sport, but for survival. You never point this at anything you do not intend to destroy, Cole instructed, his face serious. A gun is not a toy. It is a responsibility. Once the bullet leaves the barrel, you cannot call it back. Remember that. Sam absorbed it all, flourishing under the first consistent kindness he had ever known. But the peace of the valley was a fragile thing, built on borrowed time. News reached them in late April. A traveling peddler brought word from Red Bluff. Sheriff Dugan was stirring up a storm. He was blaming the town's economic troubles on a ring of outlaws and loose women who had robbed the county coffers. He claimed Cole Tanner was the ringleader and that Lily Hart had been abducted and was being held against her will, brainwashed by a criminal gang. He is raising a posse, the peddler warned, chewing on a piece of straw. Big one, 20 men. Says he is coming to bring the girl home where she belongs and hang the rest. Ethan spat on the ground. Let him come. This is free land. But Cole knew better. Dugan was not coming for justice. He was coming to silence the witnesses. The day the posse arrived, the sky was a brilliant, aching blue. It started as a dust cloud on the horizon, a smudge of brown against the green of the foothills. Then came the sound, the low rumble of hooves, the jingle of bit chains, the creak of leather. Cole was in the barn. He saw them coming. He grabbed his rifle and walked out into the yard. Sam was by the water trough. Cole signaled him. Get inside. Sam, get under the bed. The boy ran. Lily came out of the house. She was wearing a simple calico dress, but she had the Winchester rifle in her hands. She stood beside Cole. Go back inside. Lily, Cole said, his eyes fixed on the approaching riders. No, she said. The posse rode into the yard. There were 15 of them. Deputized drunks, hired guns, and a few confused-looking townsfolk who had likely been bullied into joining. At the front rode Mark Dugan. He looked thinner, his face drawn and tight, his eyes burning with a feverish light. He pulled his horse up, the animal snorting and dancing. Ethan stepped out onto his porch, a double-barreled shotgun resting in the crook of his arm. You are trespassing. Dugan, Ethan called out. I am here on official business, Dugan shouted. I am here for the outlaw Cole Tanner, and to rescue the woman. He looked at Lily. His gaze was possessive, terrifying. Come here, Lily, Dugan commanded. Step away from him. It is over. You are coming home. Lily stepped forward. She did not step away from Cole. She stepped in front of him. She stood between the man she loved and the man who wanted to own her. Her hands were shaking, trembling against the wood of the rifle stock, but her eyes were steady. I am not your property. Mark, she called out. Her voice rang off the barn walls. And I am not coming home. I am home. You are confused, Dugan said, his voice dripping with false concern. He has turned your mind. You are the one who is confused, Lily said. You think you can burn the truth like you burned the saloon. But you cannot. She raised her voice, addressing the men behind Dugan. He is lying to you, she shouted. He burned the saloon to hide the theft of my family's land. He killed Sarah. He killed the stable boy. Jimmy, I have the proof. Dugan's face twisted. Shut her up, he screamed. She is crazy. The standoff hung in the air, a taut wire ready to snap. The horses stamped nervously. The posse members looked at each other, uneasy. They had signed up to hunt an outlaw, not to shoot a woman who was shouting about murder. One of the hired guns, a man with a nervous twitch, jerked his hand. Perhaps his horse moved. Perhaps he panicked. His gun went off. The crack was deafening. Cole saw it coming. He saw the barrel rise. He didn't think about the promise. He didn't think about the future. He dove. He threw his body across Lily's, spinning her around, shielding her with his own back. The bullet caught him. It slammed into his left shoulder, spinning him around and knocking him into the dust. "Cole!" Lily screamed. Chaos erupted. Ethan fired both barrels of his shotgun into the air. The posse scattered, horses rearing. Bullets began to fly, smashing windows, kicking up geysers of dirt. Lily dropped to her knees. Cole was groaning, clutching his shoulder. Blood was already seeping through his fingers, dark and bright red. "Get to cover!" Cole gasped, his face gray. Lily grabbed his collar. Panic, cold and sharp, tried to seize her throat. She was losing him. The man who had given her back her life was bleeding out in the dirt because of her. "No," she hissed. "You do not die. You promised." She dragged him. She found a strength she didn't know she possessed, hauling his heavy frame behind the stack of oak barrels near the barn door. Bullets thudded into the wood, sending splinters flying into her hair. She ripped the hem of her petticoat and pressed the cloth against his wound. "Stay here," she ordered. "Keep pressure on it. Lily!" Cole grabbed her wrist, his grip weak. "Do not go out there." She pulled her hand away. She picked up the Winchester. Her eyes were blazing with a fierce, unyielding light. "They are not going to kill us. Cole, not today." She turned and ran into the barn. Ethan's hands were returning fire from the bunkhouse. The yard was a kill zone of swirling dust and smoke. Lily climbed the ladder to the hayloft. She crawled to the loading door that looked out over the yard. She saw Dugan. He had dismounted and was taking cover behind a water trough, firing wildly at the house. "Dugan!" she screamed. He looked up. She fired. The bullet struck the wood inches from his head. He flinched, ducking down. "Listen to me," Lily shouted, her voice cutting through the gunfire. "Stop shooting!" The sheer ferocity of her voice, combined with the confusion of the posse, caused a lull. The shooting sputtered and died down. Lily stood up in the loft opening. She was a silhouette against the dark interior of the barn, the sunlight slanting through the broken boards around her. Dust swirled like gold motes. She reached into her bodice and pulled out the folded paper. The deed. "You want to know why we are here?" Lily shouted to the men crouching behind their horses. She held the paper up. "This is the deed to the Hart homestead. My father's land." She read from it, her voice trembling but loud. "Transfer of title to Mark Dugan. August 16th, 1885. Cost 0. She looked down at Dugan, who was staring up at her with hatred. "My parents were buried on the 14th. Lily said he stole it before the dirt was even settled on their graves, and he kept the timber money. $400. She pointed at Dugan. "Ask him. Ask him where the fines go. Ask him why he keeps a black ledger in his desk." Dugan stood up. He didn't care about the posse anymore. He didn't care about the law. He only wanted to silence the voice that was stripping him bare. "You lying witch!" Dugan screamed. "You are ruined. No one believes a whore." He raised his pistol, aiming straight at her. Lily raised the Winchester. She had him in her sights. His chest was center mass. She could end it. She could pull the trigger and the nightmare would be over. Her finger tightened on the trigger, but she hesitated. If she killed him, she became what he said she was, a creature of violence, a thing of the gutter. She refused to let him dictate the terms of her soul one last time. She refused to let his darkness extinguish her light. "Drop the gun. Mark!" she yelled. "I am the law," Dugan roared. He cocked the hammer. A single shot rang out. It did not come from Lily's rifle. It came from the side, from near the bunkhouse. Dugan jerked. A look of surprise crossed his face. He looked down at his chest, where a blossom of red was spreading across his vest. He looked up at Lily one last time, his mouth opening to speak, but no sound came out. He collapsed forward into the dust, landing face down in the muck of the yard. Silence fell over the ranch. It was heavy and absolute. Lily lowered the rifle. She looked toward the bunkhouse. A young deputy, the one whose horse had been skittish, was standing there, smoke curling from his revolver. He looked shaken, his face pale. He was going to kill you, the deputy stammered. He was going to shoot an unarmed woman. The other posse members slowly holstered their weapons. They looked at Dugan's body. They looked at the paper in Lily's hand. The spell was broken. The monster was dead, and with him died the fear that had held them all in check. Lily dropped the rifle. She turned and scrambled down the ladder. She ran out into the yard, past the staring men, past the body of her tormentor. She ran to the barrels. Cole was lying there, his face ashen, his eyes closed. "Cole!" Lily dropped beside him, her hands slick with his blood. He opened his eyes. They were hazy. "Did we win?" he whispered. "We won!" Lily sobbed, pressing her forehead to his. "We won!" The aftermath was a blur of motion and pain. Ethan and his men carried Cole into the house. The surviving posse members, shaken by the truth and the violence, agreed to testify. They took Dugan's body back to town, along with the ledger Lily gave them. The deputy promised that the circuit judge would see it. Cole would be cleared. It was over. But the real victory was in the quiet that followed. That night, the sun sank behind the mountains, streaking the sky in harsh, beautiful colors of violet and bruised orange. In the small cabin set apart from the main house, a fire crackled in the hearth. Lily sat on the edge of the bed. She had washed the blood from her hands. She had washed the dust from her face. Now, she was tending to Cole. The bullet had passed through the fleshy part of his shoulder, missing the bone and the lung. It was a clean wound. But he had lost blood. He looked pale and fragile in the candlelight. He winced as she tightened the bandage. "I am sorry," Cole whispered. He wouldn't look at her. He stared at the quilt. "Sorry for what?" Lily asked, smoothing the fabric. "I brought this to your door," Cole said. "I brought the violence. I almost got you killed. I feel broken. Ugly." Lily stopped. She reached out and cupped his face, forcing him to look at her. Her eyes were shining with tears, but they were not tears of fear. They were tears of fierce, overwhelming love. "You are not ugly," she said firmly. "You are the most beautiful thing I have ever seen. You stood in front of a bullet for me." She leaned in, her forehead resting against his. "Promise me," she whispered. Cole closed his eyes. "Promise you what? That I won't hurt you?" "No," Lily said. The words carried a different meaning now. It wasn't a plea for physical safety. It was a plea for emotional honesty, for loyalty. "Promise me you won't turn on yourself. Promise me you won't let the world make you hate who you are. We are not what they did to us. Cole, we are what we choose to be." Cole opened his eyes. He saw the woman who had climbed a burning building, the woman who had faced down a sheriff, the woman who loved him. "I promise," he choked out, "I will never use your pain against you, and I will never let my past destroy our future." He reached up with his good hand and touched her hair. "But you have to promise me something. Lily, anything. Promise me you will stop punishing yourself for surviving," he said. "Promise me you will let yourself be loved without waiting for the blow." Lily let out a shaky breath. She nodded. "I promise." She blew out the candle. They lay together in the dark. It was a tender, passionate night. It felt less like an escape from the world and more like a vow made to it. Every kiss, every careful touch, was a slow rewriting of their history. The desire that burned between them was hot. Yes, but it was rooted in something deeper than skin. It was rooted in the knowledge that they had walked through the fire and come out the other side, not unscarred, but unbroken. 3 months later, summer had come to the valley. The grass was knee-high and green, waving in the warm breeze. Lily stood at the edge of the property, looking toward a distant line of cottonwood trees near the river bend. Cole stood beside her, his shoulders stiff but healing. Sam sat on the fence rail nearby, whittling a stick, a dog sleeping at his feet. "We could build it there," Cole said, pointing to the rise near the trees. "A house, a real one, with a porch." Lily looked at the spot. It was open. It was exposed to the wind and the sun, but it was theirs. Dugan was gone. The investigation had exposed a rot that went all the way to the governor's office. Red Bluff was trying to heal, trying to find a way to be a town that didn't run on fear, but Lily and Cole were done with Red Bluff. They were building something new. It will be hard work, Lily said. Cole smiled, slipping his arm around her waist. He pulled her close, and she leaned into him, fitting against his side as if she had been carved from his own rib. I am not afraid of work, Cole said. Neither am I, Lily replied. She reached out and took his hand. His palm was rough, scarred, and warm. She squeezed it. He squeezed back. The west was still harsh. The storms would come again. The winter would be cold. But as they stood there, looking at the future, Lily knew they would face it, together. They walked toward the trees, the three of them, leaving the shadows behind. Thank you so much for listening to the story of Lily and Cole. Writing this journey from the dusty streets of Red Bluff to the high mountain valley has been a privilege. I hope their story of resilience and love resonated with you. I would love to hear from you. Please leave a comment below telling me where you are listening from. It is always amazing to see how far these stories travel. If you enjoyed this tale, please consider subscribing to From Wild West for more stories of the frontier. I invite you to share your thoughts, feelings, and feedback in English in the comments section. Until next time, keep your powder dry and your heart open.